Thanks for joining us for this first live stream that we've decided to do. We're currently experimenting with a new podcast format, which is a more casual conversational dialogue that we'll have on a more regular basis, ideally every week, give or take. And the aim for us here is to cultivate the skill of engaging in philosophical dialogue and to embody that. And so we're kind of aiming to have sort of Socratic style conversations, and so it's a way of honing our philosophical skills and just modeling the skill of Socratic dialogue, often referred to as the Dialogos. And so that's one thing to expect from us going forward. So you'll be seeing more of us in real time. So feel free to watch us more regularly, and if you want to engage with us, feel free to send us some comments or message us in the chat. In any case, I thought before we delve into our dialogue tonight, I just go over some announcements, the latest announcements with the podcast. And one of these is that it's been some time since we posted our last episode. So just to update our audience, we currently have our ninth episode getting ready to be released. It should be ready to go sometime tomorrow. So expect that to be posted on social media and to YouTube and Spotify in the imminent future. And aside from that, for tonight's dialogue, I thought we would talk about the origins of philosophy within the mystical tradition. And this ties into a lot of what we've been talking about lately. In fact, the episode coming out tomorrow is on the origins of philosophy within the scientific tradition. What I thought we would talk about tonight is the origins of philosophy within the mystical tradition, because it's currently what we have in the works. And this topic, I think, is going to be central to a lot of our conversations going forward with our future episodes. But in any case, I thought we would discuss the origins of mystical philosophy, and maybe before even proceeding to that topic itself, maybe just to give our audience a general understanding of this discussion format we're participating in tonight, which is that of Socratic dialogue, or often referred to as the Dialogos. And just for information's sake, I think it would be useful for people to know what the Dialogos is and how it's defined. So the Dialogos is a mode of philosophical inquiry rooted in collaborative dialogue, where meaning emerges through the dynamic interplay of questioning, reflection, and shared exploration. And unlike debate, which seeks to win arguments, Dialogos aims at mutual understanding and the uncovering of deeper truths. It involves active listening, openness to differing perspectives, and the willingness to revise one's assumptions. So, central to the Socratic tradition, Dialogos is both a method of philosophizing and a transformative practice that fosters self-knowledge and collective insight. So let's go into some of the components of the Dialogos that can help structure our conversation tonight. So one of these, the first, is that our dialogue is a journey and not a debate. So you and I, Ryan, we're not aiming to have a dialogue with one of us coming out winning in the end, or having one of us prove a point and showing the other person to be wrong. But you and I think, are going to be collaboratively trying to seek an understanding of the origins of mystical philosophy through the process of questioning, reflecting, and refining our ideas. And you and I think, we're not opponents, but you and I are trying to contribute to the unfolding of truth regarding the origins of mystical philosophy, starting with partial or tentative insights and then evolving through our exchange. We're also going to be focusing on this is another component, but we're also going to be focusing on the role of questions, and our Socratic dialogues will revolve around asking deep and probing questions that challenge our assumptions, and regarding various topics like the origins of mystical philosophy, topics that invite contemplation, right? So, we might ask questions like, what is the nature of mysticism? How does it emerge from experience? And the key for us is not to come up with a definitive answer, but to engage in a process in which our questions deepen our investigation. And then a third component is that of tension and resolution. So, Dialogos that you and I are going to be participating in involves exploring the tensions and contradictions between our ideas. So, for example, exploring the tension, say, between mystical experience and rational philosophy, and allowing ourselves to make these unexpected connections. And then finally, the fourth component of Dialogos is reflection and openness. So here, you and I, the participants in the dialogue, are trying to remain open to revising our views. So true Dialogos thrives when humility meets curiosity, qualities of which are embodied in the Socratic maxim, I know that I know nothing. So, with all that background and context, I thought we could just segue into our actual dialogue now, Ryan, and start off with the opening of our dialogue, which is just to, think of why this topic is important to you and I. We can sort of establish how we want to engage this topic. I think the best approach might be one of openness, curiosity, not being too attached to our ideas. And so, yeah, so maybe I'll start just with why I think the topic's important to me, and curious to hear your thoughts after. But for me, I think mystical philosophy is important because, for one thing, I'm curious about the origins of things and the origins of thought. And then, mysticism and mystical philosophy represents one of the core strains of, Western thought. And so I'm interested in where it comes from. Um, and, I think by having that understanding, I'll have a better grasp on, you know, um, causes, what are the causes? Um, what causes someone to, you know, have the beliefs of a mystic? Um, for example, one mystical belief is the belief in the unity of everything, the unity of life, um, and one of the core principles of mysticism as well is mysticism is not simply a system of thought, but it's also a way of being. It's an ethical orientation to the world. So I'm curious as to like where do these core concepts and notions come from, because they play such a pivotal role in human life and the way we conduct ourselves. Informing our ethical philosophies, our spiritual beliefs, our core religious principles, and so forth. So I guess I'm just curious as to like where it all comes from, Ryan. Um, and I think possessing that kind of knowledge too is you know can be useful. Because we want to know why things are the way they are. Um, so, anyways, that's my take on it to a first approximation. I'm curious as to what you think on this.
I would say that I'm kind of interested in it for all the same sorts of reasons that you are, but I think one additional point I would add for myself um, is the location of where that it happened, which would be sort of in modern day Italy, and its links to um, the church and the Bible. I think um, there's some history, but and connections between the two of these philosophies. And in my experience, like I, go to church. I with a small community of believers, and we believe some kind of unorthodox things in compared to other Christians that you would run into. And so I've kind of experienced a bit of that mystical experience and that kind of social community that goes along with mystical philosophy. So a bit of it is a bit more personal in that sense. For me, I think that's why I'm like really like wanting to dig into this a bit more.
That's uh, that's interesting to hear. So it's a personal matter for you. It's your it has personal significance. Um, yeah, yeah. I think that's totally valid. I um, I kind of feel the same way in many regards too. I mean, insofar as I feel like I'm a spiritual person, I'd like to know where my own spiritual beliefs originate and what tradition they've been influenced by. And I think in probing this topic and um, this subject, I think we can get not to maybe some definitive answers, but maybe gain some clarity on you know um, the questions themselves. So yeah, unless you have anything else you want to add, I think we could jump into the questions.
Well, I was wondering like what sort of personal experiences like in your life or, in the communities that you exist in, like is there anything that has sort of like sparked this interest in mystical philosophy or that you can kind of like ground it in? Are there any like adventures or things that you're doing that you're sort of investigating mystical philosophy with
Right. Yeah,
or
that's a
through?
that's a good question you ask. This is getting into I guess the personal relevance of this subject. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I've always had a mystical you know quality to my personality. I've always you know viewed my time in nature as a way of connecting to a larger whole, greater than myself. Hiking and camping and um, doing things like foraging for mushrooms or just exploring the wilderness around me. Different species of plants and things that I'm curious about finding out on my hikes, and kind of those experiences kind of reconnect me to the larger web of life, which I think we're all connected to. And you know, it's a core mystical doctrine that there is a continuity of life, both in a spatial sense, like everything is connected together in space, but everything is also connected together in time as well, according to the mystics. So, um, I think mysticism offers an interesting perspective that can help clarify and shed light on my own mystical tendencies. But yeah, just time out in nature has been a way for me to connect to the spiritual dimension. I think I'm also just very much interested in like religious doctrines too, and how those. I think they're all ultimately rooted in experiences, and so I'm curious as to what the nature of the religious experience is, and like what is its source. And a tradition that I'm kind of getting into right now is shamanism and exploring the shamanic worldview. Um, but that taps into the spiritual dimension and presupposes the existence of invisible forces, which we might view as part of being part of a spiritual dimension. Various animal spirits and you know um, you know things that are beyond this dimension. I don't want to catalog the whole list, but in any case, yeah, there's that tradition, and then how to tap into that experience is fascinating to me too. So I think it can occur in ordinary waking states while you're out on a hike or something, but I also think it can be induced by alterations of your body's chemistry. Through shamans do it without drugs. Well, some of them do at least, but drumming, chanting, and so on. Um, and then some of them can do it with the assistance of drugs, various psychedelics and what have you. So there's different traditions and different ways of tapping into mystical experiences and mystical states. Um, but I suppose that that's kind of my own um, story of why this topic fascinates me. Um, but in any case, yeah, that's the best I can do, in a short space. But yeah, does that kind of answer your question in general?
Yeah, I think that gives me a good idea.
Okay, good. Well, in any case, we don't have a ton of time left, and we're trying to keep these conversations short. So, in the time we have remaining, I thought we would just sort of explore some of these initial questions that we've been wanting to pursue. Sort of the fundamental questions that can guide our conversation. I don't think we'll get through um, all of the nuances and details in this short conversation, but we can start scratching the surface at least. So, one initial question I think would be interesting to pose and to reflect on is what are the origins of mystical philosophy and why does it matter today? And then, secondarily, what is mystical philosophy and how is it distinguished from other types of philosophy? So, I'm happy to start with either of these questions. I kind of feel like maybe the second question to begin is the more fundamental, like just to clarify what it is we're talking about first, like what is mysticism? What are its core components? But I guess to a first approximation, I think that mysticism is it's a way of life. It's not just a system of thought. It's not simply just a beliefs you have about the world and how it works, but it's a way of orienting yourself practically to the world and conducting yourself and on the basis of certain ethical precepts and principles, and usually those that are ethical in nature. Those principles, for example, that prohibit killing, or which um, principles of benevolence, treating all life forms with respect and so forth. Um, that's one. Those are some of the hallmarks of mysticism, in my view. Uh, Also, it's generally thought of as being more of an emotionally based philosophy rather than just being purely rational. So there's a certain emotional component that goes with mysticism and mystical experience. Usually mystics will have like an experience, a revelation of sorts, and not simply just an intellectual grasping of the truth, but often an insight can be revealed through um, you know spontaneous experience of emotional overflow or something, and then the intellectual comprehension comes after that or something along those lines. Um, but in any event, yeah, those are some general thoughts I have about what mysticism is. And then of course there's kind of your um, prototypical mystical philosophers like Pythagoras, who I feel like
Ask
he's
you
a
a
good
couple of
touch.
questions on that one though first.
Pardon me?
Can I ask you a couple questions on that
Oh
just to
yeah,
clarify? Yeah.
for sure.
Um, so from what I hear you saying, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to be in some sense grounded in experience, this like sort of mystical philosophy. Like something happens to us in our experience, and from that we're able to grasp or perceive things in a new light that we maybe perhaps, didn't before. So is it more of like an intuitive philosophy in that sense, or
Yeah, I suppose so. Um,
hmm,
um, I think that mystics, um, you know, often would through various rituals and so on would achieve certain ecstatic states, um, and that would be, I guess, a way of participating in the divine through like prayer, through chanting, sometimes through taking like psychedelic compounds or drumming, doing various things to alter your state of consciousness, and then through that altered state, um, arriving at new understandings and insights about things, um, which goes beyond mere, logical reasoning and abstraction, but it's rooted
Yeah,
more in a visceral, felt experience.
that that sounds to me very like again rooted in the social aspect of things, where like like you're with like a group of people, and through that like you can feel your energy carried to new heights in a sense that you could never really reach or imagine before. But like in that group of people and in that ecstasy, it's like you're able to arrive at new ideas and new ways of thinking.
Hmm. Hmm. Does this question of what is mysticism, does this like personally resonate with you? Like, I'm curious to hear about what your own take is on it, and do you agree with sort of the view that I outlined, that it being a way of life that is grounded in a more emotional and felt experience?
That sounds right to me. Like that sounds like what my gut feels when I think of mysticism and my experiences with it, anyways. My, or at least my perceived encounters with it.
Right. Well, that's good. It seems like we're both, have our views converge on this. So I think we would probably agree on a lot with respect to that. Um, but mysticism aside, we could distinguish mysticism and mystical philosophy from um, scientific or maybe more rationalistic philosophy. And typically, um, that style of philosophizing is rooted more in um, logic, abstraction, um, you know, sort of calculating things, um, you know, on the basis of certain, logical rules or according to certain formulas, like mathematical formulas. It's it has a much more, um, I suppose, intellectual undertone to it, and the aim, unlike mysticism is sort of one of the core aims of mysticism is to um, align yourself with the world and conduct yourself in an ethical um, manner um, in your everyday life. Um, the scientific tradition, in contrast, aims to master uh, master the world and to model and explain the world, and it doesn't necessarily have an ethical aim. The aim is explanation and control and prediction, and scientists would typically do this by coming up with theories and testing their theories and validating their theories, falsifying their theories, refining their theories, coming up with empirical evidence and experiments which demonstrate the validity of their theory, and then on the basis of these findings, using this to um, predict and to um, master the material world, like Isaac Newton coming up with his laws of gravitation and so on and so forth, and his mathematical calculus to represent all of that, and then with that you know system of knowledge, we've been able to do things like you know um, build and engineer technologies, that have revolutionized the world, right? Um, and yeah, so that's a case in point. Um, but in any event, that's sort of to a first approximation, a distinction between mystical philosophy and scientific philosophy. I guess, one representative philosopher, if we're kind of to contrast um, uh, Pythagoras as a mystical philosopher, would be maybe Anaximander, who sought to explain things through like um, the primordial elements of like earth, air, wind, fire, and other principles like necessity and justice and so forth. And his aim wasn't so much ethical as it was just making sense of it all and making sense of how how life evolves and how the cosmos comes together through these these elemental principles and these abstract principles. So that's kind of a very rough first approximation of the difference. But in any event, hopefully that sheds some more clarity on the difference between the two traditions and philosophies. I see that we're kind of nearing the end of our discussion, Ryan. Instead of diving into the question of origins, do you want to maybe just focus on mysticism versus uh, rationalism and the scientific tradition, and just maybe examine some um, tensions and divergences that have come up in our conversation so far? Maybe looking at things like is there seems to be a surface difference between the mystical tradition and the scientific tradition, but upon closer inspection, is this maybe just an apparent difference? Is there a unity between the two traditions, you think?
I mean, I think mystical philosophy is more about harmony, and the scientific tradition is more about mastery. And I think they come at the same thing from different ends of the spectrum. Like, I think this is a very rough way of explaining it, but in a way, mystical philosophy is kind of like slave philosophy, and the scientific philosophy is more of the master philosophy. It's already sure and it's fine with the way things are. They just want to know why, like, you know, why it is the way that it is. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? Like, they're fine with it being the way that it is because they're the rulers or the masters.
Right.
Whereas the mystical tradition, it emerged in like the outskirts of the Greek Empire, like in
Right.
Italy,
Yeah.
right? So it wasn't like uh, the central figures of like actual Greek people, with the Greek mindset doing
Right.
these sorts of philosophies. That's
Yeah.
sort of the way I'm roughly breaking it down. That's obviously very crude,
Right.
and probably wrong on a lot of levels, but that's kind of how I'm seeing it. Is you know they're both philosophies, and they both have, like, to say the rational philosophy isn't really about morality is a bit false, but
Mm-hmm.
we get what you mean by it, right? Like, it's not its primary focus.
Right.
It's there to sort of already justify the way that things are.
Right.
um, that's sort of how I see it.
Right.
um, but yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's a connection to them. They link up in some way, but they are different. It's like yin and yang. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I kind of hear what you're saying. Um, I'll have to ponder what you mean by that distinction between master and slave in this context. We don't need to necessarily go down too far down that rabbit hole, but in the time remaining, maybe I'll just briefly go over my own views, and then we can see what kind of insights we can synthesize. Then we'll just close our circle and wrap things up.
mm,
So, one thing that came to mind in um, reconciling the um, mystical philosophy and scientific philosophy is that there does seem to be a unity between emotional experience and rational inquiry. And I think Pythagoras who in fact was from Italy. You alluded to mysticism originating in Italy. I think it might have been more distributed than that, but it was certainly like a locus, a geographic locus of where mysticism emerged. Because Pythagoras, I think he was originally from Greece or Greece adjacent, but he migrated to Italy, and I think that's where he started his mystical school. So there might have been, um, the difference of place might have made a profound difference in the expression of his philosophy and mystical philosophy. In any case, that's a whole other topic we could go down. But bringing focus back to this question of resolving this duality between emotion and reason. Pythagoras himself was probably among the first philosophers to reconcile the two with his notion of theoria. And theoria was this um, mystical contemplation of the the nature of reality, and for Pythagoras that meant the intellectual contemplation of the mathematical structure of reality, because he thought that reality in and of itself was fundamentally mathematical and could be understood as being made up of numbers and numerical principles. So his whole view of cosmology was numerical. We might call it a numerical cosmology, but that wasn't entirely divorced from emotion, because the experience of contemplation was fundamentally tied to this ecstatic dimension, and an emotional attunement to the world, to what he might call the music of the spheres. But he thought that all of the cosmos had this inaudible music, and that to tune yourself into this music of the spheres was to come to know the cosmos, and its mathematical structure. So there was this sort of intellectual ecstasy that preceded the intellectual comprehension of the universe. But that's all. This is just to say that emotional visceral experience and that rational logical contemplation are fundamentally intertwined in some ways. And just to further round this out, philosophers ancient and contemporary have pointed to the unity of emotion and reason. More in the more contemporary setting, we have philosophers like Ronald de Souza, who wrote a book called The Rationality of Emotion, who pointed towards this notion of our emotions having a fundamental cognitive component to it, more or less like a rational appraisal of a situation, like fear, for example, being directed towards, judging a situation to be dangerous, for example. So that being based on some kind of practical reasoning, right? And then Damasio, of course, the neuropsychologist, has done experiments on individuals who have damage to their prefrontal cortexes, which inhibit certain emotional responses. And in the absence of those emotional responses, these individuals can't make effective decisions, which is just to reinforce the view that to make effective, practical and rational decisions, there needs to be an emotional component to that rational decision making process. And then finally, just to finish my bit here, thinkers like Einstein, scientists like Einstein, also come across to me as being mystical in some ways. Like Einstein talking about this cosmic mystical feeling that sort of inspired a lot of his curiosity and his inquiries into the nature of the physical world. And then Isaac Newton as well had an interest in alchemy, which is not strictly rational, but also has this emotional and irrational element to it as well. So, in any case, that's my 2 cents on the apparent dichotomy between emotion and reason, and how that tension between the two might be resolved. I don't think we can. We're kind of almost at our limit now, and I don't think we have much time to dive into this question of the origin. So this is more or less just all of a preface towards the main question, but I think it's been a fruitful digression and exploration, Ryan. Um, and so I think I'll let you comment, and then we can synthesize our insights and round out and summarize. So go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely like what you've done here with, linking reason and emotions. I could see how, someone who can't feel or express emotions wouldn't be able to, make rational decisions. Can, if you imagine somebody in a social situation or even in, just like a regular everyday situation, if you don't have fear to prevent you from doing something that's gonna, harm you or whatever, then you're gonna get yourself into situations that aren't rational or reasonable to be in.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I definitely see how the two are linked and depend on one another. Just like if you have emotions but you don't have a reason, well,
Yeah,
you really get in trouble.
yeah. There's emotion to reason, and there's reason to emotion. Um,
Hmm.
so two sides of the same coin, I think. But
Yeah.
yeah, in any event, I think all of our reflections and observations and insights point towards this unity between reason and emotion. So I think if we're going to synthesize any insights and apparent contradictions from our discussion, it's that the apparent contradiction between emotion and reason is just that. It's just an appearance, and that if we were to probe a bit further, perhaps the two, in some sense, are unified in a profound way. Um, and why that's significant is because um, talking about the mystical tradition and the scientific tradition as fundamentally opposed traditions might be false. The way I've been kind of thinking about it is they're on a continuum, and it's more or less a difference of degree and not kind. So it might very well be true that all scientists, in some sense, have a mystical side, a mystical nature, and maybe some prototypical mystics as well. Also have certain tendencies that would be characteristic of someone who is more um, scientifically and rationally inclined. So, in any event, I don't want to go too far much down that rabbit hole, but just to point out um, the resolution to some of these contradictions and sort of these syntheses that can be drawn between these apparently contradictory ideas. And so, I suppose now would be a good time just to close the circle and um, you know, end by reflecting on, where this journey has got us and what we've maybe discovered what we've discovered about the nature of mysticism and um, mystical philosophy, and what we've discovered about, the scientific tradition and scientific philosophy. And for me, I think um, what I've discovered is that there is this unity between um, the experiences of the mystic and the tendencies of someone uh, who we might consider more of a scientist, and so I think that points to um, perhaps uh, a continuity between the two traditions, the mystical tradition and the scientific tradition, which is interesting and worth exploring, perhaps in some more depth. Um, and so, yeah, maybe I'll just leave it at that. That's sort of the key takeaway for me, at least at this point. And I'm curious, do you have any reflections that you'd like to touch on before we close?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have learned more about how to integrate these two sort of sides or aspects of philosophy together, like in my own life. And I think being able to see more of the connection between, like reason and emotions and these two seemingly dichotomous sides of philosophy really help bring together your understanding of, you know, whatever it is that you're trying to learn. like being able to put on that rational cap, or be able to ground yourself more in experience and be a little bit more intuitive and playful with your ideas. I think that's really where you're gonna find yourself shining in whatever it is that you're trying to learn or do in life.
Yeah, I think that's a profound way of rounding out the discussion. Um, and I don't think I really have much else to add to that, Ryan. Um, so I think on that note, we'll just sign off for now. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And stay tuned for more live stream conversations in the near future. And in the meantime, be wise and keep philosophizing. Talk to you soon.